Welcome to Beyond Words Presents. My name is Whitney Diffenderfer, and I'm here with Ron Pevney. He is the author of the brand new book. It came out yesterday called Conscious Living, Conscious Aging. He is also the head, the director and the founder of the Colorado-based Center for Conscious Eldering. Welcome to the show, Ron.
Well, thank you, Whitney. It's an honor to be here.
Thank you so much. I want to make sure that everybody out there who is watching, remember, if you have any questions or if you want to be a part of the conversation, be sure to submit your questions via the Google Hangouts app. And you can also submit questions on Twitter or on Facebook, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube page as well. So, Ron, one of the things that you talk about a lot, and it's a word that you use, and ever since we started working with your book, I've been curious about, is the word eldering. For me, that conjures up images of really, really old people. What does it mean to you? What is it in your context? What does that mean?
Well, throughout human history, the role of elder has been a critical role for the well-being of individuals and well-being of their societies. An elder has always been a role that has been honored and revered. It's the elders who have lived long enough and have done enough personal growing that they've been able to be the wisdom keepers for their society. They're the ones whose job it has been to remind their society of those values that endure, that are most important, to help their society see the bigger picture rather than just what the immediate needs are. It's been the elders who help their societies to remember that we need to be looking at the well-being of generations to come. You know, to use that Native American imagery, the seventh generation down the road. It's been the elders who've been the teachers, the mentors, who've given the gifts developed over a whole lifetime to their community in meaningful roles. I think we all are aware that in our society, the role of elder has disappeared in many ways. When you hear the word elder, you do tend to think of elderly. And what do you think of when you think of elderly? You think of frail and, and weak and vulnerable. But there are many of us who believe that the role of elder and, claiming the role of elder can be an incredibly empowering thing for people in our society as we age. And that whole process of claiming the role, but it's not just a matter of putting down your fist and saying, I'm an elder, but it's really a matter of doing the growth work, the personal growth work that really leads to the kind of wholeness that can enable us to be the kind of elders that our world needs. And so conscious eldering, as I see it and write about it, is that whole process and that commitment of continually growing as we age, so that we can more and more embody elder gifts and wisdom for our own well-being and for the well-being of the society around us.
It's really interesting as you speak about that. The images that are showing up in my head are the preference that we seem to have for younger people. Like the younger the possible candidate for an office looks, the more enticing they are. Or like as a lot of the baby boomers and a lot of the people who are kind of perhaps in your perspective moving toward that eldering or that elder position, they resist it. Like they want to still seem young, and they do all those things that try to make themselves feel young. And so it's really like there's a resistance to getting older in our society. And I think you hit it right on the head, is the fact that the perspective on eldering has changed completely, so that it's not an honored position anymore. It's something to fear, something to shy away from. So how can people who have been indoctrinated, who have accepted this particular perspective, start to shift their perspective so that they really do give that honor and that time and that the growth that is necessary to eldering?
I think that ultimately what's going to help the younger generations to shift their perspective is when they start seeing older adults stepping up and claiming that role of elder, acting like elders. And what we see around us so much is as people age, and especially as they get toward retirement age, all of a sudden feeling that, hey, my whatever I've had to contribute that's meaningful is pretty much behind me. We see people accepting that now at your retirement age, you basically become irrelevant in your society. And so what we do is do our best to hang on to who we have been for as long as possible, not realizing that there is so much more growth and contribution that we can possibly make. And so as more and more older adults step up and act like true elders and age consciously, more and more younger people are going to see, hey, there's a different way of viewing older people. They're not just people who retire and then expect to be on the public dole for 30 years playing golf. They're people who really want to continue to make a difference in the world. So that's going to be a big part of it. And I think another important piece is that people, especially when we get into midlife and midlife adulthood, and are beginning to now and then think about our older years and beginning to stick money in retirement accounts and things, if we begin to really honestly examine what are our visions for what it means to get older, what kind of stories and mythologies have we ingested from the world around us that are basically going to disempower us as we get older and make us less and less relevant? What are our true feelings about getting older? Why do we have these? And are they valid? And I think as we begin to question a lot of those things, a whole lot of us are going to see that, wow, we have this fascination with youth because the culture around us has a fascination with youth, but it has nothing to do with the reality of how people age and the potential for people to grow through life stages. It takes a lot of self-examination.
Yeah, I'm thinking for myself, what is it that comes up for me when I think about aging? Because I'm coming up on another birthday here in about a month, and I will be 31. And turning 30 for me was it was a challenge because it is that next landmark. It's like, okay, your 20s are over, now you have to start growing up. And so I was just looking for myself and seeing what is it about growing up and being older that has me resist that. And I think one of the things is that it seems like the fun will go away, and that and not to be crude or anything, but just like you're closer to dying. So that it's like the time that you have yet to live is getting shorter and shorter. And I think I'm probably not alone in that perspective. So is there something that you could give me guidance on that could help me start to shift that perspective?
Well, Whitney, I would remind you that when you are young, it seems like you've got many, many, many years ahead of you. And so it's real easy to postpone doing things that can really help you come alive. It's real easy to postpone a lot of things thinking, oh, I've got plenty of time. Just imagine as the years ahead of you grow shorter, if you allow it to, imagine the sense of almost urgency to live life really fully, to embrace every moment of life knowing you don't have forever. And I think that's an important realization in conscious aging or conscious eldering, that we can let our awareness of our mortality serve to really help us see each day as precious, rather than thinking, oh, we've got forever, we can just blow it off today, maybe tomorrow.
Well, and I think there's another side of it too that some people get, which is as soon as they realize that that they aren't going to live forever, all of a sudden they become very cautious. They become very shut down and try to force more time, and then they also are not doing what you're saying in terms of living every day to its fullest. So there's a fear that I think comes in there as well.
Yeah, that's right, there is. And that's why I believe that conscious aging or conscious eldering, and in my book I tend to use both terms somewhat synonymously, even though I prefer conscious eldering, it really encourages people to look at their fears, to become aware of the fears that we carry,
Mm.
to become aware of the attitudes we carry, to not let them just control us, but to become aware of them, and to see that just because we fear something doesn't mean it has a whole lot of truth to it.
Yeah.
And I think that's what being conscious is really coming to understand our own inner dynamics and understand those kind of things that drive us and what the source of our fears are and how we can transform some of these kind of things so we can approach life, with zest rather than fear.
Yes.
There are a lot of older people who shut down. There are a lot of older people who shut down out of fear, older people who shut down out of belief that not much is possible, who shut down because they haven't learned resilience and how to deal with loss. And as we age, we're all going to suffer more loss. There's no denying that. But I'll tell you, those older adults, those conscious elders I know who serve as wonderful models for me, are people who have learned resilience. And they have learned that in the face of loss, you grieve for a little while, because there's always a grief when we lose something. But then you look at the opportunity, and they realize that when one door shuts, it is true, other opportunities arise. And they may not be the same ones we had when we were younger, but they're whole other opportunities for fulfillment and growth and service. Those doors open as we suffer losses, even if they are big losses. And so that's a whole lot of what conscious aging is about, is developing that kind of resilience and flexibility so that loss doesn't all of a sudden send us into some downward spiral.
Yeah, that is a huge challenge. And I know that one of the things that you talk about in your book is the practice of a death lodge. Does that tie in with that being able to deal with people passing in your life?
In many ways it does, and I'll say a bit about that. That the death lodge is a practice that's really important in the retreats and workshops I do. Many participants find it one of the most powerful things we do, and I think it's important in my book. In a nutshell, the death lodge imagery comes from a Native American practice among certain of the Native American Plains tribes. And the practice is, in effect, that when an older person, an elder, really sensed that death was near, they would go to a place, a lodge or a teepee, somewhere near the edge of the village. And while there, they would entertain, one at a time, people who had been important in their lives. Mm. And they would have those critical conversations with them that can be so poignant when you know that this life is about to end. And in those conversations, they would offer forgiveness or ask for forgiveness when needed. They would express appreciation and gratitude when needed. Mm-hmm. They would have those conversations so they can really feel complete with those other people in their lives and with themselves in terms of their relationships. And then once those were done, then they felt more ready to move on, knowing that they didn't have unfinished business. They brought completion. Now, the relevance of that to conscious aging work is that so many people, as we age, carry around a lot of bitterness and cynicism, resentment, because we've never offered forgiveness. Regrets as to how we treated people or how certain relationships just have never had an opportunity to have a good completion. And oftentimes these incompletions are with people who have already died. Mm. But in the death lodge work, we encourage people to find a place, preferably outdoors, even though it doesn't have to be, that they kind of designate as a place to do this work. And when they're doing it, they consider it a sacred, special work. And when they go in, usually with a bit of prayerfulness and ritual to help set the stage for it, then when they go in there, they invite the spirits of those who they feel they need completion with uh, to come and visit. And they have a conversation with the spirit of that person. And you know, it's not like, excuse me, it's not like most people see a spirit. But there's a sense that somehow, in some way, this person's essence is with me. And I can tell them what I need to say. I can offer forgiveness. I can ask for forgiveness. Sometimes people do it using their journal to help with the back and forth conversation. Sometimes they do it just kind of imagining it. Sometimes they do it, you know, sitting in one place, being one person, and then using the Gestalt technique of moving to another seat and being the other person. And you know, when you just hear about this, it may sound like, oh, that sounds, doesn't sound real. It sounds airy-fairy. But so many people have found when they enter into these kind of conversations that such wonderful, wonderful clearing happens. They feel so much better about their relationships. They feel so much better about perhaps people that they have lost, because now they have a sense that I lost them, but what needs to be said has had a chance to be said. Somehow we have mended or healed the relationship. And so it's a very powerful practice to help people for two things. And one is to help people just to clear out some of that baggage that we all carry around, so that when the time comes to die, we don't have it. Because anybody who's worked in hospice will tell you that so many people on their deathbeds are in misery, unable to let go because they have all this unfinished baggage. But also, the value in this is that I believe, and I tried to spell this out well in the book, that it is a kind of a death as we move from identifying as a midlife adult to identifying as somebody who's beginning to enter those elder chapters. It is a death in a way of an old sense of self, which needs to happen so we can move forward into the new possibilities, into a new identity. And so this kind of work, like Death Lodge work, forgiveness work, working to transform regrets, can be so powerful to help us clean up the past, so as we move into our elder years, we're not carrying a lot of baggage that just keeps us stuck in the past. For many people, might keep us bitter, might keep us full of regrets, and nobody can be the kind of shining, conscious elder that I envision and know is possible if we're dragging that kind of baggage with us into our elder chapters. So that's a long answer, but I hope it gives some sense of the kind of important inner work, of which the Death Lodge is one example, that can really help us to prepare for a conscious elderhood, and at the same time help us prepare so that when the time comes to die, we've got a lot of that inner work already done.
Well, and as you're describing this, and it makes me think again. I mean, I am the age I am, and I do have regrets about my 20s. I have regrets about some of the life that I've lived up to now. And as you're describing the exercise, I'm thinking of my own personal list of people that I would want to have that kind of conversation with, that I would want to just either forgive them for, ask forgiveness for, or just acknowledge them and let them know how important they are in my life, or let go of things that I've been holding on to, whatever that is. And I could see that being really valuable where I am right now in my life, so that I can launch into this next new chapter. As many people know, I just got married, and so that really is, I suppose in some ways you could look at it as it's the death of my single life. My single life has now completed. And so
that's right. That's right. And I would say that many of the kind of perspectives and practices in my book about conscious aging are totally applicable to people at other stages in life. They're about how to live more consciously, especially as we move through life transitions, like the kind of transition that you're going through. As we learn to be more conscious, especially in transition, we're going to be much better prepared when we get to that transition, when we get around retirement age, and all of a sudden we're thrust into a whole new phase of life. We've learned how to be more conscious. We've learned how to move through transition. So I encourage you to take any practices that you would like from my book and apply them in your life now.
Fantastic. Yeah, I'm almost starting to relate to this because I was like, I don't know how I'm going to relate to Ron because I'm not anywhere near retirement. But what I'm really hearing you say is that it's a guide for transitions in life. It's a guide for those times when there's a big change, and that you can move through them with grace, and you can really open your life up so that you can live every day to its fullest without those regrets or that frustration or whatever that was there before you went through the transition. So that's fantastic because I'm in one. And before we go on, I just want to mention to everybody, I'll hold it up here. It's a little pale. Oh, there you can see it. His new book, Conscious Living, Conscious Aging. I love this cover. I think it's beautiful. And I think the title really speaks to what we were just speaking about. It's really about living consciously and aging consciously, whatever age you're at, and is specifically helpful for people who are looking at that transition into retirement. And we always talk about the fact, have you set up a retirement fund? Are you paying into it every month? We have that as part of our normal awareness in society, but we aren't talking about the kinds of things that you're talking about, Ron. So this book gives you that piece so that you have not only the financial piece taken care of, but you have this emotional, you have this spiritual, the day-to-day life living of retirement formed for you. And so for this show, we are offering a special. It's 30% off. You can get it for $9.95 at www.beyondword.com/Pevny, Pevny. So be sure to run and get it, because I have kind of put this book as something that I could give to my parents, but not something for me. And now as we're talking, I'm really getting that this is for me too, where I am in life.
And I would add, building on what you just shared, Whitney, that I think it's remarkable, but it's a reality, how many people put money into retirement funds, and in some cases almost obsess about how am I going to have enough financial security in retirement, and put almost no energy into that emotional and spiritual retirement fund. And of course, we need to have some measure of financial security, but having a bunch of money in the bank and not having a reason, a meaning to get up in the morning, not having a sense of purpose, just kind of feeling irrelevant and just trying to hang on to who we have been, does not provide a very fulfilling retirement for many people. Absolutely. And so I think maybe you could call my book an emotional and spiritual retirement fund guide for people.
Absolutely. Well, and how is it so say somebody who is watching this who is maybe a couple of years from retirement and they have done the financial aspect, but they're just learning about this kind of work. How would you advise them to start on this path? How would you advise them to start trying to find that purpose and that role that they're going to lead after they retire?
Well, at the risk of sounding self-serving, I would suggest that they might want to purchase my book. And there are a lot of really good sources. There are a lot of really good books and articles out there, an increasing number that can help people to begin to see a more positive, empowering vision for aging. I think an important step to take is for people to really spend some time looking at what are those things in my life that I have felt most joy and most passion for. For many people, those kind of things, or some of those things, have had to be put on the shelf as they have made a living, raised a family, done whatever. Getting in touch with them again. And oftentimes it's the things that brought us the greatest joy when we were kids. That tells us something about what our truest passions are. Spending time really looking at what are those things that have brought me alive. Are there ways that I can bring some of those into my future as I age and let them bring me alive now that I might have more time and resources to be able to engage in them? I think another important step is to be really honest with ourselves in looking at what is it that used to be in my midlife adulthood meaningful to me, gave me a sense of real life and engagement, but if I'm honest with myself, are really losing their zest. What are
Mm.
those things that are just kind of, the energy just pooping out?
Yeah, you do them because you did at one point in time find a passion, but now it's kind of a have to almost.
Or I don't know any different. Um,
Mm.
but an honest assessment of what used to have meaning that doesn't now.
Mm.
And by doing that, it really can help us begin to understand that we're not the same kind of person all the way from 30 up until we die. We do change. Meaning shifts in us. Values shift. We have to look and see, not just with our minds, but with our hearts, what really is shifting in terms of what's important and meaningful to me. And I guess the one other thing is to do some honest assessment of, to try to get a sense of, once I do reach retirement age, whether I'm able to retire or not. And I think we all know, everybody listening to this show knows that many people, either out of choice or necessity, don't retire. But really beginning to get a sense of, how can I structure my life in the years ahead so that there is meaning and purpose. There is some passion. Even if I have to do a job maybe I don't enjoy for the finances,
Mm.
what can I make sure I build into my life so that I do feel passion and joy, so that I feel I'm growing, and so that I feel I'm making some kind of a meaningful contribution to my community. And it's not something you do just sitting down one night or one weekend at a workshop or something. It really is an ongoing process of trying to get a vision for who we might possibly become and what could bring us joy. And for most of us, and this certainly maybe isn't true for everybody, but for most of us who are at all self-aware or self-conscious, that idea that many people have, well, when I retire, I'm just going to putter around the house, that does not provide much of a sense of meaning or purpose for most people. More than that is needed. But it
Mm.
takes some real self-assessment to begin to get a sense of what is it that's really calling me as I move forward. So I think that's a good way to start.
That sounds sounds like a lot of thinking and a lot of self-introspection, and it's one of the things that I've always thought of. It's, and I know many people do. They're like, retirement. Ooh, so I get to sleep in for days, and I don't have to worry about anything. I don't have deadlines. I don't have to worry about my boss. None of that. And it sounds like what you're really saying is that maybe not going back to that necessary, not that form, but really finding something else. Like I'm hearing you talk about being a contribution to your community, and um, are there places or people that you could talk to help you find out what is out there in your community, or how would you advise people to go explore that, or to even create it themselves?
In every community, maybe for starters, there are many, many nonprofits that are offering valuable services. And in today's world, with the financial realities, most of these nonprofits really do need the help, significant help, of older adults, oftentimes without pay, to be able to keep up their missions. So one place to start is just taking a look at the whole nonprofit sector in the community and seeing what's available there. What are the opportunities? Talking to people. I suggested that one might, if one's serious about this, every week or every month, make a point to go talk to somebody, whether somebody who works with a nonprofit, or somebody in the community who has fascinating ideas, or somebody that maybe is involved in something that you think you feel passionate about. Just every week, talk to somebody about possibilities,
Mm.
about what might be possible, so that you're gradually, slowly but surely, beginning to get a feel for how the future might be. And you said a minute ago that so many people, well, I can't wait to get rid of this lousy boss or this unfulfilling job, and that's real.
Mm.
But anybody who I think knows anything about counseling or coaching people who are nearing retirement age will tell you that it is critical that you're not thinking just about what am I retiring from, but also what am I retiring to. And if you don't have a sense of something meaningful that you're retiring to, I can almost assure you that after a little while, after you have those first wonderful days of being away from the boss and the lousy job, all of a sudden it is going to get incredibly stale.
Hmm.
And if it gets incredibly stale, then, you know.
Then you start looking for another job.
Yeah, you might be looking for another job, or you might be looking for something that has meaning for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting because it's almost like we spend our lives, well, not our whole lives, but a large part of our life being defined by our job, by what we do, and it's always one of those first questions that you get asked whenever you go to some sort of cocktail party where you don't know people. They ask you, "What's your name and what do you do?" Those are just, they're right there. But as soon as you retire, it's almost like you make who you are. You make those choices based on who you want to be. Ideally, that would be how it would be all your life, of course. But sometimes, because of financial reasons or whatever other reason, you end up just doing a job because it's a job. And I'm hearing you say retirement is an opportunity to create that life, to create who you are in what you do.
That's right, because who you have been when you retire is no longer the case.
Mm.
If you've identified with your status, your role, your job, all of a sudden that is gone. And so it is a wonderful opportunity to redefine and to recreate who you are.
Mm.
You know, one other thing I would add, a lot of people who are prominent voices in this whole positive aging or conscious aging movement are beginning to advocate something I think can be really important. And that is, my wife is in a situation where in 2 years she's going to retire from what's been a fulfilling but a very stressful job. And when she hears about this conscious aging, she keeps thinking, well, God, there's some expectation that instead of me finally relaxing, I need to get out there and be serving the community and being a visible elder and everything like that.
Mm.
And she says, I just really want to relax and take the pressure off for a while. So what this, and I understand that. And so what I encourage and what a lot of others encourage is that if at all possible, when you retire, give yourself a period of time, if you can afford it, give yourself maybe 6 months to a year that you might consider a gap year. In the same way that a lot of kids give themselves a gap year after college or before college. Give yourself a gap year with an understanding you won't put any pressure on yourself to do anything.
Mm.
To just kind of be and just kind of see what goes on in you, kind of see what things feel like. And what happens for so many people is that, then they do have this time where they can just relax, absolutely do nothing. And then they come to realize, I need more than this. I kind of got that out of my system, but I need some meaning now. And so be paying careful attention during that time and doing a little investigating as to, okay, now that I've had this time away from any responsibility, what's kind of calling me? What's kind of moving me as I move forward? Mm. And for most people, after that gap time, they're going to approach whatever they feel is next for them with a new sense of energy and a new sense of enthusiasm. But they wouldn't have that if they had just the day they retired all of a sudden plunged into something else. Make sense?
Absolutely. I love that idea because it also gives time for exploration. So it's not like if you've given yourself permission to have a year where you're not going to go after anything, where you can just relax into it, all of a sudden it's like you're going to be traveling, you're going to be exploring all sorts of different things with friends, and then so you have like a whole year to look at all of the different possibilities as opposed to trying to figure out what that's going to be while you're still trying to work right before retirement.
That's right.
That sounds wonderful. Well, and another topic that you talk about a lot is the idea of a legacy. And for me, as soon as I say that word, I feel like this heavy weight on me, just like, trying to go into something immediately at retirement. And the idea of a legacy, the way that you speak about it, it's very, very different. How do you explore legacy and what that means to people?
I think that there are two primary dimensions to the whole theme of legacy. And you might define legacy, there are different ways, but a nice simple definition might be what we have given the world, how we have used our personality and our gifts to make some difference in the world, and what is the impact that we have had on others. As we approach our elder years, especially if we're doing it consciously, we become more and more aware of what we have given, what gifts we have, to what extent we have made a difference. We become aware of that, we honor that. And this is the important thing, I think a lot of people, and this is what our culture believes, by the time you reach retirement age, your legacy is pretty much done. It's pretty much defined. And so you either rest on your laurels, or if you feel you've had a pretty poor legacy, then you feel regret that, boy, how much of a legacy I left to the world. But imagine if we see these 20 or 30 years after retirement age, and many of us are going to have those, as an opportunity to create a whole new or expanded legacy, a legacy of our years as elders, a legacy that can build upon the legacy we've created, prior to now, but a legacy that is a legacy of increased fulfillment, of making a difference in our world, of living as fully as we can each day. If we see legacy as something we have yet to create, and it may not be, when we were younger, that it's a real visible legacy, like we're out in the world doing big things, even though it may be. I mean, there are many, many older people now who are doing big, important, visible things. But if we see our legacy just as our way of making a difference as we age, of being relevant to our world. And for some of us, like in my case, it's writing a book, running the Center for Conscious Eldering and stuff. For other people, it might be something as simple as grandparenting with real awareness of the impact we're making on our grandkids, and with total love and presence. It might be as simple as just attending to our own growth, so that we grow spiritually and we grow emotionally as we age. It might be volunteering in the community. It might be whatever. But if we kind of consciously look at these years as a time of continuing to build legacy that is important, that helps to provide that sense of meaning and purpose, and to help us see that we are relevant in our world, no matter what our age, no matter what our physical abilities, no matter what our particular gifts.
Well, and I love the fact that it is what you deem important. It's not necessarily what society deems as important, because whenever you think of a job or anything, society says, okay, well, you should be the COO or the owner of the company or somebody really high up, and that's where the value is. Those are the people who create those incredible legacies. And what you're speaking to really is whatever speaks to you, whatever you deem as important is your legacy, is the thing that will have you feel most alive and engaged, and that's the gift that you give to the world.
That's right. That's right. And much of conscious aging is about coming to that point where we become more and more aware of what is authentically that voice in us that's letting us know what we love and what we want to do and are called to do, and differentiating that from all these other voices that we've all taken in from the world around us. And that's one of the reasons, and my book in many ways makes this point, that conscious aging is very much spiritual work. Beyond Words is very much a publisher of transformational books, recognizes the power and importance of the spiritual dimension of our lives. The more we allow ourselves the space, the time to be reflective, to use whatever spiritual practices are meaningful and effective for us, to really get to know that inner voice in us, the more we create some of that silent space, because I think we all know that we can't hear that inner voice when we are surrounded by inner or outer noise. The more we do that reflection and strengthening our spiritual lives, the better we're going to be to really know what it is that's calling us moving forward. What's going to bring us joy? How might we best express whoever we are? True vision for who we can become really does come from the spiritual dimension of ourselves, much more than it does perhaps creating a checklist. Okay, here's 100 things I could possibly do. Which ones seem to turn me on? It comes from a different place in us that is more intuitive, more grounded in spirit, and not just from the mind. So cultivating that kind of inner knowing is such a big part of conscious aging work.
I'm curious. I thought of the tradition. Well, I don't know if tradition, but something that a lot of people do is they create a bucket list. How does creating a bucket list fit in with what you encourage people to do and finding themselves as they get older?
I think that's a wonderful question. When you think of bucket lists, what comes to mind, of course, is bringing some kind of intentionality, to the years ahead rather than just kind of drifting. And intentionality is critical. We either become conscious, intentional elders, or we just become old people who kind of drift into getting old. The bucket list, as we normally see it around us, is usually what? It's usually, this list of these exciting things I want to accomplish before I die. I want to go skydiving. I want to go on this exotic trip to Borneo. I want to, do whatever. We encourage people, and I have a chapter that's devoted to this in my book, rather to do a practice that we like to call 10 intentions for 10 years. And don't get hung up on the numbers. They're not as important as the whole concept or dynamic behind this. But it's, as we age, to take a look at every aspect of our lives, because we are multidimensional people. We have a part of us for whom relationships are important. We have a part of us for whom joy and play and just entertainment and adventure are important. We have a part of us for whom health and wellness is important. A part of us for whom somehow expressing our gifts in the world is important. A part of us that, at least for those of us who are somewhat aware, recognizes that our spiritual unfolding is important. These are all aspects of us. And so we encourage people to take a look at each of these aspects and to come up with intentions. We call the exercise 10 intentions for 10 years, but it's basically picture yourself in, let's say, 10 years and look at all aspects of your life. And what are intentions that seem to have real heart for you, where you can, as you age, address each of those aspects of your life with intentionality, so that in, let's say, 10 years, you will have a life that really looks in many ways like the intentions that you're envisioning now, because you're approaching each of these with focus. We're talking about a bucket list that is much more comprehensive than just some great adventures. And this is the kind of bucket list that can enable you as you grow to be whole, because you're attending to every part of you as you age.
Well, and the intention behind it, when I think of a bucket list, I think of, just as you said, like a list of very disparate things that once you do one, you just check it off the list and it kind of goes. And what this 10 intentions for 10 years sounds like is that you're creating a whole life, like the full picture of it, and that, may include a lot of the things that would be on a normal kind of bucket list, but maybe not so just I'm going to go do this, and then I'm going to go do this, and then I'm going to buy this, and blah, blah. It's really looking at full living, whole living.
That's right. And I would add one more thing I didn't mention a second ago, and that these 10 intentions, this intentionality isn't just about a bunch of things we're going to do, but it's also about getting a vision for, as we age, how is it we want to be? Mm-hmm. What kind of person do we want to be? And so much of conscious aging is about getting in touch with what's the kind of person we want to be. And we often have people come to our retreats and workshops who come and they announce, I'm hoping to get a clearer picture from what I'm going to do as I age, or what I'm going to do after I retire, or whatever. And they end up leaving saying, the main thing I got is I really got a deep, heartfelt sense of the kind of person I want to be. Mm-hmm. And from that, I can trust that if I know who I want to be, then the pieces for the stuff I'm going to do will start to fall into line. But if I don't know the kind of person I want to be, then I could be doing a pile of different stuff. But who's doing it? Not a person who feels whole, who feels joyous, who feels fulfilled, who feels spiritually connected. So that's another aspect of the 10 intentions. How do I want to be, and get as clear a picture in our minds and perhaps in our journals and in our meditations of how we want to walk on this world, who we want to be.
And that, to me, ties in with the idea of the legacy as well, because who you're being in the world of your legacy kind of helps create that as well. It really solidifies it, so that when people think about once you pass, or just once you've passed out of their lives, they remember you for who you were being. I mean, I think that's frequently how people remember people. They don't remember them for the particular acts that they did, but really for who they were being.
That is right.
And I just want to take another moment to remind people that you can get Ron's book, Conscious Living, Conscious Aging, with all these great practices in it at www.beyondword.com/Pevny, Pevny. And in celebration of the launch and in celebration of Ron being on the show, it's $9.95. It's 30% off. So be sure to run and get that. And then also follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you have questions for Ron, please feel free to send them into the Google Hangouts Q&A, because we want to make sure to get any of those questions answered for you. So Ron, one of the other things that I heard you say earlier is the idea of this shining elder, this elder who has really taken the reins. What does that all look like? What are all of the different aspects that you are calling people to pay attention to as they do go into, well, I keep saying retirement, but as they get older, as they become elders in our society?
Well, in terms of what it looks like, I think each of us can be our own shining elder in the way that is unique to each of us. So there's not some kind of a template, that people are encouraged to aspire to. But I can tell you, among those wonderful elders that have served as models for me and for others, and from whom I know the kind of conscious aging that's possible, these tend to be people who are passionate about their lives. They tend to be people who have learned how to be truly present with others. And when somebody's truly present with you and when somebody isn't. They're people who tend to exude a certain, equanimity, throughout their lives. As they age, they have learned how to not get carried away by all the winds and storms of life, to stay in touch with some kind of an essential, quiet strength within. Many of them view it as a spiritual strength that helps them to keep equanimity through everything. There are people who are committed to, in some way or other, whatever that way is for them, continuing to make a difference in their world, maybe in a bigger way, maybe in a smaller way, rather than disengaging from life, being engaged in any way they can up until up until the day they die. You know, I have a wonderful story. A woman named Marguerite Pollock, who became a friend of mine here in Durango, Colorado, where I live. Margaret sustained many losses, and her husband passed away, and she was up in her 80s, didn't have many physical abilities anymore. She went to a nursing home, and Marguerite ended up becoming a magnet. People would come to her room under any pretext just to be with her, because these qualities that she had developed throughout her life were so beautiful and touched people so deeply. That was her gift to the world at that particular point.
Mm-hmm.
And before that, she was a teacher, she was all kinds of stuff. At that point, her gift was just the wonderful quality of their being. All these conscious elders I know are people who never feel that they have reached the goal. They never sit down and say, hey, I am a conscious elder, I've reached it. They always are striving because they see that more is possible. They see that they, in ways they can continue to grow as long as they're still alive. And so they see conscious aging or conscious eldering as a way of life and a practice, and not something that you ever actually reach. They're curious, incredibly curious about life. And they don't, at least as I've experienced it, they don't carry a lot of baggage from the past. They don't have cynicism. They've pretty much done that inner work. They don't have resentments that hang on. They definitely don't carry around regrets. Sure, everybody has some regret of things we have done or not done that, when we think about it, it causes us some grief. I'd say one more thing about regret I didn't say earlier, Whitney, and that is we can relate to our regrets in two ways. And one way is to say, yes, I've learned something from that. It hurts a bit to think about it, but I have learned and grown from it, and I'm going to move forward and never, make such errors again. The other way is to say, I have regrets, I screwed up, I'm inadequate, I'm unlovable. All these kind of things just feed a story that just saps our energy and our beauty. And the conscious elders I know and I advocate for don't let regrets disempower them. They learn from them and they move on, and they don't stay stuck in the past with their energy tied up in their regrets.
Well, in that perspective on regrets, it automatically makes me I think of my mother, and my mom has a hard time being really confident in herself, and she's not really confident in her own self-worth. And I wonder if it's because of regrets like that, where she's just kind of come down on herself so many times she can't really see, what it is that really is her unique contribution to the world, and how she can be that conscious and contributing elder that she already is. So it's interesting to see how those regrets, even if they may be small, may have over lots and lots of time really eaten away at your idea of what you have to bring to the world and your confidence in what you have to bring to the world.
And for many people, that is indeed the case. And if we carry these stories about ourselves of being incompetent and unworthy, then any time we do something that maybe we're not proud of, that just serves in our minds as more to feed this story. See, here's further proof.
Absolutely.
And that's why the conscious aging, it takes work. And in learning to transform regrets, to look at these experiences, to see the life lessons in them, to learn to forgive ourselves. And I think most of us would say that self-forgiveness is the hardest kind of forgiveness. All of this is a process that happens over time. It takes work. For many of us, it takes a little guidance to know it's possible and to know how to go about it. And books like mine can provide some guidance. In some cases, just a little therapy or counseling or coaching can provide good guidance. It takes commitment. It takes some work, but slowly but surely, most of us can transform this stuff from the past so that we can be the kind of shining elders we want to be.
Well, and one of the questions that you have is that, how how do you not fall back into the day-to-day? How do you just stay conscious, and how do you stay with these practices that you're learning on a day-to-day basis, as opposed to just falling into what you've always been doing? And it just speaks to exactly what you're saying. It does take work. It takes a level of engagement with your life that is not really normal, especially for people who are working, because for people who are working, it's very easy to just go the day to day. It's like, I have to show up at work at 8, I do my work until 5, and then I go home and I have dinner and I go to bed. So I'm getting from myself, it's like to have that kind of engagement and constant exercise and constant, looking to see what is fulfilling me, what is triggering my curiosity on a day-to-day basis. That kind of work will have me, once I get to that retirement age, really be ready and excited for that next step in my life.
That's right. It does take work, even though I wouldn't suggest that every free moment of our lives we're over there engaged in deep introspection. It's not like that. It's kind of an ongoing commitment. I think an important part of it, Whitney, is to stay conscious on a daily basis, is to spend some time, in fact, to make a practice of looking at when are we going on automatic. Because the opposite of being conscious or aware is operating on automatic. And so just with that awareness, to look at our daily lives and say, when am I just on automatic, almost hardly any personal choice, I'm just kind of reacting like, an automaton to stimuli. When am I doing this? And in those moments, are there ways that perhaps I can approach it with a little more awareness and intentionality rather than just going on to automatic? I think what's real important for many people is to take a look at what are those things in my life that are almost automatic, that tend to numb me out. Because another opposite of consciousness is being numbed out. Not being aware, just being numbed out. What are those things that tend to numb me out? For many of us, just for an example, allowing ourselves to fill ourselves with images of fear and negativity, being obsessed with the news, for instance, it numbs us out. It numbs our sense of hope and inspiration. It just numbs us. For other people, it's surrounding ourselves with people in our lives that we know don't bring us joy and just kind of drain us. The kind of people who drain us.
Yes.
Okay, so perhaps we need to, it would serve us to replace some of those people with other people who tend to inspire and bring out the best in us. What kind of addictions do we have? Do we numb ourselves in front of televisions or in front of devices, just almost on automatic, rather than doing things that really help us to feel truly alive, and not just doing something just to fill our time automatically? Just making a practice of becoming aware of when we're most alive, when we're numb, what tends to numb us out, what tends to make us feel alive. At any point in our lives, your age or mine, that could be powerfully important. I think it's very, very important for certainly for us as we age and envision our elderhood.
Well, and also going back to what you said earlier, the things that at one point in time in your life might have really lit you up and engaged you, they aren't necessarily the same over time. And so I know that there's probably friends that I've kept forever just because they've just been friends forever, or things that I've done forever because they're just things that I've done. So being that conscious and not letting that automatic way of doing things come in, well, not letting it, but being aware of it will maybe help me see, even if not necessarily getting rid of the friend, but just like rejuvenating the relationship, because I'm sure they feel it too.
That's right.
Yeah, so it's really a gift to everybody around you, that kind of consciousness and that kind of engagement.
And if we come alive, it can help those around us to become a little bit more alive.
Yes.
As we become more aware, it can help them to become a little bit more aware. For those of us who are really focused on aging consciously, as we age more consciously, it can help our peers to see, they'll see something in us. They'll say, God, there's a certain life in this person. A certain excitement, a certain passion. Why is it missing in me? Perhaps it's possible for me to be that way also. It'll get people questioning a little bit this widespread belief that that basically we're just in some kind of a holding pattern after our retirement years. I would say that, well, I went and saw my physician for my yearly physical recently. And he was asking me, he's a guy who will actually take a couple minutes to talk to you. And he was asking me, what are you doing, Ron? And I told him, about my conscious aging work. And this is him talking. He said, with most of my patients over 50, maybe over 60, he said they seem to just be in a holding pattern, just holding, doing their best to hang on to the past, no real sense of purpose, just holding. And I want people to see that we can aim much higher than that. That our aging cannot be just us being in some holding pattern, but we can be aiming high. And in fact, I began my book with a quote attributed to Michelangelo, and it says, the greatest danger for most of us is not that we aim too high and we miss, but that we aim too low and we make it. And I would suggest that for so many people as we age, we don't aim at all. We just kind of drift. And so the more we can engage in conscious aging or conscious eldering, the more it could be an opportunity to aim high. And we may never quite reach our most noble visions for where we might get. We may never quite accomplish all of our 10 intentions for 10 years we're talking about. But at least we know we've aimed high and we're going to accomplish a lot of it, rather than just allowing ourselves to be drifting in a holding pattern.
And you'll feel so alive when you do it, I'm sure.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, Ron, I want to say thank you so much for being on the show with us. We've actually reached our hour, and I'm so excited about this because I've always looked at this book and really focused on, the conscious aging part, and really thought, okay, this is for older people. That's great. We've got our demographic good. But it's really, what I'm hearing is really, it's more about the conscious living part. It's really about how you engage with your life. And I was going to give this book to my parents, and now I'm going to take it home and read it for myself too, so that I can have that kind of really fulfilling life every day. Because why not start now? Why not start whatever age you're at, living consciously? And just thank you so much for answering all the questions so in depth, and I really feel like I have a great view of how life could really be.
I've enjoyed this very much, Whitney. I thank you. And I would just reinforce what you said, that the more as you are younger you learn to live consciously, the easier it's going to be to age consciously. And, what a gift you give to yourself and to others.
Thank you so much. And so everybody else knows, same time, same place, next week we will have author Randine Lewis. She wrote a book called The Way of the Fertile Soul, and she's going to be showing us how, and it's very interesting that you're on this week, Ron, and that she's on next week, because what she's looking at is where do we transform in our lives? How do we acknowledge this is a position that we need to transform? How do we transform it, and then where do we go from there? So it's going to be a really exciting show, and I think it'll tie in really well with this one. So join us again next Wednesday at 1 p.m. on Google Hangouts, and we will speak to you then. And again, Ron, thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure, Whitney.